Hi everybody, I'm Jackie Marks at Desert Rose Quilts, and we're going to talk about quilt math today. I'm hoping to make this a series of quilt math videos, so just drop a comment and let me know what other quilt math questions you have, and we'll see if we can get them answered. But the first one we're going to talk about is binding fabric. How do you know how much fabric you need to buy to bind your quilt? So I've come up with a little formula here. I mean, I didn't invent it or anything. I'm just going to share it with you. And I'm going to run through the formula with you real quick in case you just need to know what that is, and then I'll explain it quickly. So to calculate binding, you need to find the perimeter, divide by 38, multiply by 2.5, and then convert that number to yardage, and that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to explain that in a little more detail. So the perimeter of your quilt, to find that, you'll need to measure the top and bottom of your quilt and the sides of your quilt. The top and bottom should be the same number if it's a rectangular quilt, and the sides should be the same number if it's a rectangular quilt. If they're not the same and it's already quilted, you might want to trim it up a little bit. If it's not already quilted, you might want to talk to your long armer about what he or she can do to help you with that. But the perimeter is going to be this measurement plus this measurement plus this measurement plus this measurement, which, if your quilt is 37 by 46, is going to be 166 inches. 166 inches is the length of the strip that we need to bind our quilt with. We don't want to cut 166 inches off the bolt because we'd have too much fabric. We only need a 2.5-inch strip. So we need to know how many skinny strips off the bolt we're going to cut to sew them all together and make a 166-inch strip. Most quilting cotton is between 42 and 44 inches wide, right? So why aren't we dividing by 42 or 44? Well, I'm assuming you're going to cut the selvage off. You don't have to, but most people do. And a lot of companies now have these really beautiful, wide, decorative selvages on the edge of their quilts. So maybe you only get 40 or 42 inches off of that bolt of fabric. If you pre-wash it, you lose a little bit more due to shrinkage. And when we join our binding strips at an angle, we're losing a few inches off each strip that way. So that's why I'm assuming that you have 38 inches of width on your fabric to work with. We need to know how many 38-inch strips we can sew together to make up 166 inches. So we're going to divide 166 by 38, which I've done, and that is 4.368. We can't cut 4.3 strips off of the bolt. We need to cut 5 strips off the bolt. So, however wide your strips are going to be, you're going to multiply that by 5. The math is pretty easy if you're cutting 2-inch strips or 3-inch strips. I like to cut mine at 2.5 inches. And so 5 times 2.5 is 12.5. So I need 12.5 inches off the bolt of fabric to be able to have enough fabric to bind with. And I have a little chart here in case you don't know. You probably want to go ahead and write this up and keep it in your sewing room. It's a really nice reference to have if it's not something that you can do in your head very quickly. I need 12.5 inches, I think is what I said. 1/3 of a yard is 12 inches. 3/8 of a yard is 13.5 inches. So I'm going to probably have to get 3/8 of a yard cut at my quilt shop. They're probably not going to cut me 12.5 inches. If they do, that's great. You have a great quilt shop. And if they won't cut 3/8, if they're only cutting in quarter yard increments, then you'll need to get a 1/2 yard, which is fine. You'll have a little bit left over. Most people want to have a really long tail to join their binding with at the end of the binding process. I think that I'm already going to have that with these numbers because, as I determined, I only needed 4.3 strips of binding. I'm only using 1/3 of that last strip of the binding. So I'm going to have 2/3 of a strip left over to join them together at the end. It should be enough for me. if you want extra, you want to calculate an extra strip in there. So with those numbers, we need 3/8 of a yard. Let's do it with some other numbers. If I have, where's my diagram? Oh, here. If I have a 60 by 70 inch quilt, I've done the math. The perimeter is 260. I need 7 strips at 2.5 inches is 17.5 inches, which is just under half a yard. If your quilt is 100 inches square, which is a really big quilt, your perimeter is 400 inches. You need 11 strips, which is 27.5 inches, which is just over 3/4 of a yard, so you need to get 7/8 of a yard or 1 yard. So you can see a really big quilt still doesn't even need a yard of fabric for binding. So a yard is a pretty safe bet if you have a large quilt to work with. So I hope that helps. I'm going to show you the little calculator here again. You find the perimeter, divide by 38, multiply by 2.5, and then convert that to yardage. So let me know what other quilt math questions you have. You can also follow me on Instagram at heartsonmyfoot or on Facebook at Desert Rose Quilts. And let me know if that helped, if you have any other questions, if I forgot something, and if there's anything else you'd like to learn about quilting. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.